Welcome to T320 Block 4. The first document that you want to read is the companion, and as you proceed through the block, do make sure that you keep the aims and outcomes from the companion in mind all the time. Do look through the outline of the block before you start work on any other parts. Don't go straight into the practical work without first understanding what you're trying to achieve. The workload is quite intensive, and you do need to plan out what you're going to do and when you're going to do it to make sure that you have completed all the aspects before you come to the end of module assessment work. We're going to look at the practical work today and how it relates to the rest of the module. And we're using the Active BPEL Designer. There's a user guide which gives you details, and if you're unsure of something you can look it up here, but the course materials do take you step by step through all the activities that you need to take. You may need to use the guide to look up a few aspects when you come to the end of module assessment. The first document that we need before we start any practical work is the Active BPEL Preferences, and this has to be set up on Eclipse before you do any of the practical activities. This is my view of Eclipse before we set it up. Activities in Designer Preferences, I need to go to the Window, Preferences, and I've selected Active BPEL, which is this option here. I need to give a namespace, so I'm going to use my reference, and I'm going to use the T320 and BPEL. So that is my unique namespace for this work. The expression language needs to be set to xQuery. Okay. Suppress joint failure should be left unchecked. Abstract process should be left unchecked. BPEL version should be set to BPEL 2, which is already in default. Create XPath should be checked. Disable selection failure should be left unchecked. Launch primary property dialog after add should be left checked. Right. So we'll apply that. Hopefully that accepted that. My next action is to set the layout. I need to expand the active BPEL and choose layout. Set each of the entries under the size for margins for containers to 5. This is already there. Set each of the entries under spacing between levels and nodes in the layout to 10. That's already there. Next, I'm going to set the namespace for the web services. And I want the WSDL files, and I'm going to change the namespace here to my own. And I'm going to change the XML for the schema files. Okay. Some error messages, although you might want to switch them back on later. And we're looking in the server policies, server compliance, and we're setting both of these to ignore compliance. We're also going to switch off an XML warning message. So we want XML files. And we want to set this to ignore when no grammar. We'll also set the help preferences to using an external browser. Mine's already set there by default. We need to set the preferences in the General tab on the workspace. And we need to be sure that it's set to build automatically, which is set by default here. Okay. Now we need to close Eclipse and restart it to make sure it's using that. Now let's start some practical work. And we want the BPEL perspective, open perspective, other, and we want active BPEL. Okay. We've got the Project Explorer view on the left. Our main process editor. Interfaces and process variables. An outline view when we've got something to show here. and properties and problems view. Our next task then is to create our new orchestration project, and what are we calling that? Beeple Echo, I think. Beeple Echo. And we're using the default locations. And if we now look, we've got a folder structure set out ready, and we've got the, now I wasn't expecting to see that there, because I've already done this and it was going to do it again. Now we will start a new project. So File, New Orchestration Project, and we'll call it Beeple Echo. And we'll use default locations. And if we look at this in the Project Explorer, we can see we've a lot of empty folders set up. We want to import the files that we've downloaded in zip format. If we right click, we can import archive file, browse for the file, and we want the Beeple Echo project zip. And if I click on schema, there's the echo message XSD, and the WSDL, we've got the echo WSDL, which is correct. So we can finish, and straight away we can see that in the schema we've now got the XSD file, and in the WSDL we've now got. If we look at the Project Explorer, we can see that all the components of the WSDL are present. And if we look at the interface, the port types, we can expand that as well and see the input and output parameters are set. Now we want to go back to Beeple, and we want a new Beeple process. And we want to name it in some way that makes sense. Creating the process. And we're showing errors, but that's to be expected at the moment. And Maybe we'll ignore that lot. Right, we've got the BPEL process, and if we go to the source, we can see that we have got a namespace and there's the namespace that we set up earlier. So not much there yet. And if we look at the problems screen and look at the errors, it's missing activities and it's no activity designed designated to create an instance. So that's what we would expect at this stage. So I'm back to being how we want to add the message exchange activities, and we're going to take this node and drag it onto the main screen. We're going to define the activity type as a BPEL activity, creating a partner link type, and we've got to give it a name. So that should identify it. Partner link type BPEL echo partner link type, and the role is the echo service provider. And we need to save this. And we're going to add it to the WSDL file. And then we finish. The activity type, receive reply, is already set. And finish. And now these icons are indicating what we have set up on the main screen. Now that we've got the receive and reply set up, if we look in the outline view, we can see that this is now populated with all the different components that have been set up automatically. If we right click we can see properties, and in the properties view we can give this activity a name, and we're going to give this the name client request message. And we can do the same on the reply properties. And what are we going to call this? Client response message. Right. Save everything we've done so far. Now we need the palette of options that are hidden on the right hand side of our Eclipse screen, and under the activities we want the assign activity, which we're going to drag out into between our request and response. And we're going to give it a name. Copy request to response. Make sure we copy request to response. Now we need to link these together, and we want the link tool. Click on the client request message activity. Click on it. Copy request to response. Click on it. And we've got the arrowhead produced. And we're going to click on copy request to response again, and then on the client response message. And again we've got the arrow. And if we just click on selection, that releases that tool. Right, we've now defined the sequence of activities. So the client request message receives the message. It's handled by the request to response, and we should get an action from the response. Somewhere there is an auto layout function. Click your mouse on some empty space. Auto layout. There we are, that's tidied it up. And we'll save that. And on saving it, my image here now matches the images in the instructions, which was worrying me a little bit because the arrow was being shown in a different place, but now we're the same. Now we're going to deal with the copy operation, and I'm going to double click on copy request to response. I want a new copy operation, type variable from echo request, type variable to echo response, and because it's a very simple operation, we don't need to fill in the rest of the details. So click on OK and click on OK. Next, we want to create a sample message. If we expand the port types and we want the input parameters here, and we want to generate a sample. The first screen should be the same as that's shown. We want to save this in the sample data folder. And give it a meaningful name. So it's the input to our BPEL echo. So I will call it BPEL echo in, and it's an XML file. Now if I go and look at the parameters folder over here, if I can move that over, here is our sample file. And I've double clicked on that to bring this up, and we haven't got the file coming up. Right, let me just check. What do I do in order to edit that? That's still showing me the WSDL. Looking in the wrong place. That series of items is within the WSDL folder when I should be looking in the sample data folder. So there is the sample data folder, and I need to expand that. There is the message file, and if I look at the pane, here is the message, and it's set with just string as the message. So I now need to change that to something more sensible. We're using hello world, but I will add something here. Hello from PJT, so that I know that I've generated that and it's not something that's just come from elsewhere in the program. So I'll recognize that when I maximize the interfaces and process variables pane. I've got echo request and echo response. Double click to expand them. And up here I have got a menu, and I can show the variable data. And there is my message. Hello from PJT. Go back to the menu, show variable definition. Right, so we can work our way around that. So restore. Now we want to run the simulator. To do that, we need to go to the open perspective and select the active BPEL debug. And run and simulate the process. Right. In the debug window, we've got client request message, but we're suspended at this point here. If we expand process variables, we've not loaded for the request and not loaded for the response. This icon here allows us to step over the suspended process. So if we move on, we're now at copy request to response. And we've got here that the process is execution and this part has been executed normally. And echo request, we've got our message, but echo response is still not loaded. If we step over again, again in this frame, we've got a detailed description of what is taking place. In this frame, we've got an indication of where the process has got to. And we can now see, if we expand the response, that we've got a message. If we step over again, we get to the end of the process. The message has been sent back to the client. So the processes have terminated. We can see that our process has completed normally. But note that our variables, process variables, still contain the messages. So we have successfully run our simulation.